There are so many quotes we could use for Romeo and Juliet, and I'm going to attempt the impossible and just give you these 10 to answer any question. Let's see if it works. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes. The prologue, it establishes the tragedy as a tragedy of fate, just like Greek tragedy. However, let's look at who is blamed. These two foes. So, yes, the stars, fate decided by God, but more the parents. These are the people who are responsible. It's a family feud. And Shakespeare is definitely blaming the parents right off the bat at the beginning in the prologue to let all the audience know whatever happens in this play, they're the ones responsible for this tragedy. And he emphasises that with the fricatives. That's when you repeat the F sounds at the beginning of words. Forth, fatal, foes. That's why we swear with that letter. So he shows his contempt for the parents with that fricative alliteration. Number 2. We now have Samson and Gregory setting the scene of a patriarchal society. It's all a bit lads, banter, banter, and we're supposed to find it hilarious. But underneath that, the values are not just sexist, but violently sexist towards women. And so they're imagining thrusting the maids to the wall. This is rape. It's the only way to describe it. They're really interested in maidenhead. They want to find virgins. Why? Because these are teenage boys who aren't getting any sex. This was a patriarchal society where to marry you had to be a virgin. So obviously it was very difficult to find women who were willing to have sex with you, because then it would compromise their marriage and their prospects and their status. And so obviously they're totally hormonal. The audience is finding this very funny. We've all been there, yada, yada, yada. However, the sexual violence underpins what's wrong with this society. Then we got the laughs, my naked weapon is out, ooh, my sword, my penis, hilarious. But violence and killing is directly equated with sex. In other words, what Shakespeare is suggesting here is that the violence in this society has sexual undertones. And that's why it's going to end with Juliet's tragic death. And it's why all the women in this society are oppressed. So we will see even Juliet's mother should be against this wedding with Paris, but she isn't, even though her own marriage has potentially been compromised by marrying so young. Number 3. And too soon marred are those so early made. This is what Capulet says to Paris as a reason for not marrying Juliet to him. He says, let's wait, let her wither 2 more summers in her prime till she's 16. Even that was incredibly young. Many people think, yeah, but that's how it was in Shakespeare's time. No, it wasn't. People in Shakespeare's time still didn't marry till about 24. Shakespeare himself was unusual. He was 18 and he'd got his girlfriend, Anne Hathaway, pregnant. She was 26. See what I mean? There's big debate as to whether this forced Shakespeare into a marriage he didn't want, or whether he deliberately got her pregnant in order for his parents to allow the marriage. Nobody knows. I prefer the love story because he stuck with her and he bought her the most expensive property in Stratford while he lived in lodgings in London. So I like the idea of this being a brilliant romance where he absolutely loved his wife and gave her everything he could, even though he went off to London to write plays and perform. So you decide and fit that in your essay, whether you think, if it was an arranged marriage that he didn't really want, then that colours the love story, doesn't it? It suggests that Romeo and Juliet's love story is possibly not something that he wants us to believe in, whereas if it's true love, he wants us to believe in it. You choose, doesn't matter which. So this warning says, look, I married your mother, Juliet's mother, when she was too young, and I marred her, I ruined her. And so he's looking possibly at his own marriage and saying, if we hadn't married so young, things would have been different. Juliet is coming up to 14, and her mother says, look, I had you when I was about your age. So her mother's only 27. Yeah? Her mother is only 27. That is nuts. And Juliet is nearly 2 weeks away from being 14. And Shakespeare finds this bizarre. It's not something that was normal. And the reason he finds it bizarre is this is set in Italy. Italy was a Catholic country and Catholicism was outlawed in England. You know about Henry VIII getting rid of the Pope and setting up the Church of England, destroying the monasteries and all that. So, to be Catholic is to be a second-class citizen in the UK, and Shakespeare is making fun of the Catholics here. Oh, they do things differently abroad, don't they? Getting married early. They're crazy, these people. And so it plays to the xenophobia of the audience. But it also suggests that what's wrong in this society, again, is the parents forcing marriage when their children are so young. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands to touch. So this is super important because when the lovers meet, they speak in a sonnet. This is wonderful on loads of levels. Shakespeare was famous as the most famous sonnet writer in the country. Sonnet writing was a big deal. So when the playhouses were shut down with plague, Shakespeare made loads of money by writing sonnets for other rich men. Sonnets that they could then use to give to their lovers, or sonnets that they could keep and say, look, Shakespeare wrote this for me. Sonnets were a big deal. And he puts the sonnet in the play as an advert to say, hey, I also do sonnets, you know, not just plays, but also to show that there is real love between the characters, because a sonnet is a form of love poetry, as you know. Normally, though, in the sonnet, the person who is being written about does not return the love. That was the Patriarchy sonnet, the one that was most famous at the time. However, Shakespeare plays with that, and he says, no, I'm going to make this a sonnet where they are in love, but I'm going to suggest that that love is based on falsehood. And that is why why Romeo talks about Pilgrims' hands. She has introduced the idea of statues of saints. Who has statues of saints? Not the Church of England, the Catholics. Church of England destroyed them, got rid of them from the churches, smashed them up and said, no, that's idolatry. It's worshipping false gods. We shouldn't have any images apart from Jesus on the cross. It was a really big deal, a matter of profound faith and politics. And so, you know, obviously the cathedrals were full of relics of saints because Britain had been Catholic for hundreds of years, but these were attacked. So if you go to Canterbury Cathedral, you can see Thomas à Becket, who's a saint, and his tomb was attacked in order to get rid of this Catholic past and this worshipping of saints. It's something that's really difficult for us to understand, but to Shakespeare's audience, this would have been a red flag. They're using religious imagery of the wrong religion, and comedically, they're using it to talk about sex. You know, that's what they want. They're both trying to get to the point where they can kiss without either partner showing that they're too desperate. They're both playing it cool, but they're both desperate to get to the kiss. And this sonnet is a brilliant manoeuvring of Romeo getting Juliet to kiss her, but also Juliet getting Romeo to the stage where he can say the right words so that they can kiss. So Shakespeare, although he's saying, look, they're in love, he's also undermining that love through this symbolism and saying, is it socially acceptable love? Is it real in the same way is Catholicism real and socially acceptable? The answer was, no, we don't agree with it in our society in England. Number 5. What satisfaction canst thou have tonight? So this is Juliet talking to Romeo, and he says, oh, wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied? We're back to lads, come on, I've put out for you, I've told you how much I love you. Where's the sex? And Juliet's saying, we live in a patriarchal society, young man. Once I have sex, I can no longer market myself as a virgin to the highest bidder, and therefore I cannot raise my status in society. In fact, I may not even be able to marry. So, young man, there is no way you're getting any of me until you put a ring on it. And Romeo's like, how much do I want to have sex with this woman? A lot. I'm gonna put a ring on it. So, Juliet gives Romeo this ultimatum: go and arrange a marriage, then you can have what we both want. However, Shakespeare's point is, wouldn't life be better if marriage didn't depend on virginity? Wouldn't life be better if fathers like Capulet couldn't arrange marriages for daughters like Juliet? Shakespeare is undermining the patriarchal society and saying, look, this system we've got of treating women as property of men, of fathers and their husbands, is really damaging, not just to women, but to society as a whole. Now, you can bring in that context again about Shakespeare's own marriage. You know, he is not suggesting that they got married as virgins. They absolutely didn't, because she was several months pregnant, Anne Hathaway, when they got married. Like, it was visible to everybody. There was no virginity going on here. This was a marriage of either convenience, if you're cynical, or love, if you're like me. If this video is helping you get top grades, please hit the like button. It helps the video get shared so more students can get top grades. Right. Number 6. The friar says to Romeo, young men's love then lies not truly in their heart, but in their eyes. So we've got this lovely pun between lies as in rests, but also telling the truth, which is why he emphasised truly. And so the friar is saying to Romeo, look, I don't believe in your love. A minute ago you were in love with Rosaline. You were trying to buy sex. He was offering saint-seducing gold to buy Rosaline's sexual affection. Obviously, Rosalind turned him down, which is what the friar is getting at. She knew that he was just a young man on the make. Now that he's come to the friar to say, look, I'm in love with Juliet, the friar doesn't believe it. Now, this is important because he might be right. So we have to ask ourselves, you know, is this true love? They've only just met. So you choose which way you want to go. I'm going to go with yes, but it's actually more lust. I'm definitely going with that. But you don't have to. You can say, no, this is like the moment where their eyes meet and it is true love. They're going to be with each other forever. So, yeah, I mean, you can definitely argue that. But what's important, though, is the friar doesn't believe that and he marries them anyway. So he plays a major role in the tragedy. The friar, of course, is a Catholic. So all the audience are very well disposed to saying, well, you're the villain of the piece anyway because you're the wrong religion. However, the source poem that this is based on portrayed the friar as super manipulative and super responsible, and he gets punished at the end. In this play, the friar does some terrible things. He abandons Juliet so that she'll kill herself. He runs away but gets caught, but he is not punished at the end. I like this detail because many scholars, not most, but many scholars believe that Shakespeare was actually a Catholic, and therefore he's taken this villainous figure of the friar and made him more acceptable. And the way he's made him more acceptable is the friar's motive, which is to end the feud, to bring the two families together. It is a hubris, in other words, it's pride before the fall. It's too ambitious. If he thinks about it, it's not going to work because he has to keep the marriage secret. That's never going to end well. But he's doing it from good intentions in the way that Shakespeare portrays him. However, we are critical of the friar because he's marrying them even when he realises that it's really lust that's involved here and not love. Number 7. We have to deal with the male violence in the play that came at the beginning, remember? Good king of cats, says Mercutio to Tybalt. Nothing but one of your 9 lives. So Tiber, which Tybalt comes from, was a famous figure in stories of the day. He was a cat. And so Mercutio is making fun of Tybalt, saying that he's basically a character from fable, from kids' stories. But he only wants one of Tybalt's 9 lives. This shows us that it's still lads, and banter. They're just going to have a bit of a duel. He's not going to kill him. He's saying to Tybalt, look, I'm only going to do a little bit of damage. I'm going to do like a 9th damage. I'm going to scratch you a bit with my sword. This is code for, let's put on a bit of a show. You show that you're upset with me, I show that I'm upset with you, we show off our skill, yada yada, and no harm done. However, he has underestimated Tybalt's anger. Tybalt's anger comes from these two foes. It comes from the family feud. Shakespeare is already setting this up. What's wrong with this society is that men have to prove themselves through violence. Their status depends on them being dominant over other people. Mercutio has not understood that lesson. He thinks that dominance is just symbolic. It's something that they can just do, if you like, in the playground. Imagine the playground where everyone had a sword. And you can see that fights wouldn't often be fatal because, every day, every school day, someone would be killed. So, yes, they're all carrying swords, but there are rules about how you use them. And Tybalt breaks those rules because of the family feud. And so, it's the family that are to blame. Remember, Mercutio is not one of the family members, and therefore he doesn't fully understand the consequences of his actions. Did you know you can get my guide and all my guides for free on Kindle Unlimited? Link in the description. Yes, I'm sponsoring my own video. Now, we then have Mercutio killed by Tybalt under Romeo's hand. So Romeo's kind of responsible for trying to intervene there and changing the rules of the fight. Then Romeo says, oh God, this isn't very masculine behaviour of me. He actually accuses Juliet of taking away his masculinity. And he says, look, I've just got to go out and prove myself. I'm going to have to go and kill Tybalt. So we come back to the patriarchal society and the two warring families again. He's got to defend his family honour. So he kills Tybalt, right? But what does he say about that? Oh, I am Fortune's fool. Like, oh, it wasn't me. This was fortune, this was fate. Oh, it's terrible. Look what fate has done to me. Which, of course, is rubbish. This shows his deep immaturity, and it shows Shakespeare's criticism of him. It's emphasised by the fricatives again. You remember them? They were up here, and this shows Shakespeare's contempt for Romeo's own words. So yeah, this is a tragedy, but this isn't fate in the normal sense of the gods interfering with human lives and ruining them. No, this is characters doing exactly the wrong thing and deciding on their own fate. It's the people who are to blame, as well as the patriarchal society that promotes men through their sense of honour, masculinity linked to violence and control of women. Now, we get directly to that control of women with the conversation between Capulet and his daughter Juliet. He forces her into marriage with Paris. This is a big problem for her because she's religious and she believes, therefore, that marrying, when you're already married, marrying someone else is bigamy and her soul will go to hell. So she can't do it. Her religion forbids it. So the way around that, of course, is just to say, sorry, Dad, I'm already married to Romeo. Like, let's call the feud off. Let's call the marriage off. Romeo, lovely guy, great family. We'll have loads of money. The nurse says he'll have the chinks. Romeo's already got the chinks because he's a Montague, the other rich family in Verona. But she doesn't do that. Why? Because of the violence of her father. But fettle your fine joints. There's the fricatives again. Why? You know that word that begins with F? That's what he's thinking about. He's saying, get your joints together, your hips, your joints, because you're going to be using them on your wedding night with Paris. And I'm giving you to Paris. And you better be prepared. Right? Horrible sexual imagery with his daughter. The joints he's referring to here and fettling is what potters did. So he's imagining her body as clay. And she's also the potter. She's shaping her joints to be attractive to a man. Like, that is your only purpose, daughter, he's saying. Your only job is to be sexually attractive to men, so I can marry you off to the highest bidder. Paris, he is the highest bidder because he is a count. So his social status is larger, greater. It's a greater social status than the Montagues or the Capulets. And he needs an ally now that Tybalt has been killed. So he's marrying his daughter off to the highest bidder, even though he's already told us that he knows marrying the daughter off young, his daughter off young, is likely to ruin her. So, massive attack on the patriarchal society that allows Capulet to do this. It's not just an attack on Capulet. So this leads to Juliet's despair. So this leads to number 10, the ending. So Romeo decides he's going to kill himself because Juliet's dead, as far as he knows, and Juliet's going to kill herself. That's what fate demands at the beginning of the play. But Shakespeare characterises this in a very sexual way. She takes Romeo's dagger. "Oh, happy dagger, this is thy sheath." So when she does this, it's a sexual image. A sheath is the leather sleeve in which a dagger will fit, so the blade won't cut anything. So you'd have the sheath on your hip, dagger would be in there. But it's obviously a sexual metaphor. The dagger, of course, is the penis, the sheath is the vagina. And she's doing this deliberately because this is the last sexual union, symbolically, she can have with Romeo, because he's dead. And so she's imagining her death as a sexual union between the two. It hints at the possibility that in the afterlife they will be together. But actually, they've both committed suicide, so in the religious doctrine of the time, they both would have gone to hell. Romeo and Juliet don't seem to worry about that here because they are young and immature. That is the implication that Shakespeare is giving us, and that was the implication of the source poem, that the teenagers were entirely to blame. So why does Shakespeare leave us with this sexual imagery? Perhaps he's saying, look, actually, sex is a natural function here and it's really important, and these rules that we've got about marriage are destroying our society. They just don't make any sense. We can use his own marriage to back that up, or we can flip that and say, no, this shows the utter immaturity of the two lovers. It was never genuine love. It was much more about lust, and therefore the tragedy is part of their own making. They were in love with the idea of rebelling against their parents. My only love sprung from my only hate, and what's in a name and all that stuff shows that they're actually attracted to each other because their love is forbidden, just as sex before marriage was forbidden. So you will now be able to answer any question on the idea of toxic masculinity, male honour and violence. You'll be able to answer in lots of detail about the patriarchal society. You can write about whether their love is real, is this a true love story or not. You'll cover every single question that can come up. In terms of the characters, let's imagine you get a question on Capulet. Well, can you use that? Yes, because he's one of the two foes. Can you use what Samson and Gregory say? Yes, because they say that because they're male. Capulet is a male who is in control of these men. Definitely it would fit that. Can you use Juliet's words here? Well, it looks really difficult. I don't know if I could. But actually you can. This is all about courtship, and Capulet controls her courtship because first he says to Paris, no, you're not going to marry, then he changes his mind. So you can see how all of these quotations could be linked to Capulet. If the question is on Romeo, could you use these? Yes, you could. You could talk about how Romeo said he's different from these. He's not addicted to violence at all. But actually, is that just a pose? Because at the end, he decides to kill Tybalt when he doesn't have to. Maybe he is addicted to violence. Is he obsessed with sex? My naked weapon? Yeah, he is, because Juliet says, well, you can't have sex till you're married. So he's willing to marry the next day in order to have sex. So you can actually, with a little thought, apply every single one of these quotations to whatever the essay title is. Now, if you would like to be able to write about any theme that comes up, then this is the next video you want to watch.